Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got an email from Amy Bowler. The subject line says historic. And in the email, hi, Jared. Just another tidbit for your second coming events. Copenhagen, Denmark's old stock exchange fire and toppling of its historic spire. I tend to pay more attention to these events in the news. I'm sure lots of folks think, oh, well, just another fire. But collectively, all these things tell a story, I think. Thanks for all you are doing to bring our attention to important signs and events. Thank you, Amy. I had seen this, I think, on X, and I think a few other people may have commented, but I saw your email, and yeah, this is what happened. This is on Visegrad 24. Denmark is having its own Notre Dame moment, and it is strikingly similar in appearance to the Notre Dame fire because of this spire on top of the old stock exchange. So here's the Borsen stock exchange that's on fire. And then there's a video of Notre Dame and its fire. And one of the notable features was the spire that burned. A lot of people are drawing this, comparison between the two events. This is from We Have It All. It was 5 years ago, yesterday, April 15th, the Notre Dame fire occurred. So this is like another one of those things. We've been having a lot of these lately where something happens where it's almost to the day. So for example, you have the Yom Kippur War that started in almost 50 years exactly to the day is when the October 7th attacks occurred, which started another war, a war similar to the Yom Kippur War in that it was a surprise attack. It happened on a Jewish holy day. So now you have this, first you have a symbol of religion, Christianity, the Catholic Church, all those things, right? And then almost exactly 5 years later, you have this, and this is a symbol of, you could say the free world, capitalism, the free market, Western values, things like that. And yeah, I think there is a story here. I do, because I tend to think this way. The reason why is because when you have dramatic events like this take place and people are watching, they start to think things, and it's a perfect way for the Lord to put thoughts and emotions and warnings into people's minds. Usually when you have something dramatic like this, there's a certain amount of people that will take it seriously and view it as a warning or a sign. Just look at all these people that are drawing the comparison between these two events. Now, there's actually a lot of interesting things about the Notre Dame Cathedral and the fire, but I have an entire video going over that. But let me just call your attention to this if you haven't seen it. In fact, I'll probably put this on the Facebook page because it only has 3,000 views. So in March of 2019, President Nelson met with Pope Francis. The first time that a president of the church has met directly with a pope. Okay. And then a month later, that's when you have the Notre Dame Cathedral, the spire falls, they renovate it. And then 5 years later, you have the Salt Lake Temple that's under renovation. And on the same day that they put the final spire on top of the Salt Lake Temple, that was the same day that they finished or unveiled the spire, the reconstructed spire of the Notre Dame Cathedral. So there's much more than that. There's so much more. But I'll put a link for this in the description box below. Also put it on Facebook. And then I did another kind of like follow-up video because there was this interesting thing that came to my attention where it came to my attention when I saw this article about Elder Rasband visiting Lahaina, which last year experienced a fire similar to the Paradise, California fire. There's like a lot of fire events going on. I probably need to make a new spreadsheet for this. But he used this curious phrase. In fact, it came up a couple times in the article, both him and his wife, this phrase, beauty for ashes. And it felt like there was something to that. And there is. I'll show you right now before we continue on with the stock exchange. So this is in Isaiah 61 verses 2 and 3. To proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance. That's the second coming. Okay. And the day of vengeance of our God to comfort all that mourn. So here we're talking about the second coming in a way of like healing, right? For some, it's going to be ashes. For others, they're going to have beauty and healing. It continues, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. And I go into more of that here, okay, but it has to do with the second coming. It has to do with the burning. It has to do with the millennial world and how there's going to be a lot of healing during that time. Healing from wickedness and the effects of wickedness and evil. So I went to the scripture citation index and I wanted to see how often they were using the word ashes and ash, and then the phrase beauty for ashes and things like that. And it's a recent phenomenon. Okay, you can see it right here. Here's the 4 phrases. There isn't anything for beauty from ashes, but you have ash, beauty for ashes, and ashes. And you can see right here, I guess primarily maybe from like 2015 until 2022, you have like this spike in using these terms. When you go back in time, it just kind of fades away. You do see ashes more frequently because it's not necessarily part of the phrase beauty for ashes, but you see a dramatic spike in recent years. Even more so, I guess you could say, during President Nelson's time. Now, I have this other tracker. So these are for words and phrases in general conference talks going back to 1942, but I also have this spreadsheet called Timeline Scriptures, and it goes off of scripture citations. So any general conference talks that cited Isaiah 61:3. And if you do this yourself, just keep in mind, when you go to the BYU Scripture Citation Index, it breaks it up into all the verses used. So I added this one right here, 1 through 3, 2 through 3, 3 by itself, and 3 through 4. So I added all that up and put it on this spreadsheet. And it's even more clear here. So again, President Nelson's time with the highest concentration in 2021. Go back in time, there's one in the year 2000. That was by Sherry Dew. And then one in 1944. So for some reason, and I think I know why, they're really thinking about this concept of beauty for ashes, healing in the second coming, evil going away, wickedness, wicked people not being around, tears being wiped away, and moving into a brighter future. So when you watch these 2 videos right here, it seems like it really goes together. It feels like there's been a lot of fire things going on recently. We know that fire, that's going to be the big event. There's going to be this worldwide burning. From our study, it seems like it's going to be because of the glory of the Lord that covers the entire earth. And unless you're translated, you're not going to be able to withstand that glory. And so the wicked will perish. But if you're living at least a terrestrial law or a celestial law, then you'll continue on into the millennium. But fire and ashes and healing, you see what I mean? So going back to this stock exchange thing, so you have like this like really interesting connection between the stock exchange and the Notre Dame Cathedral. With the Notre Dame Cathedral, there was also a lot of like imagery of like rising from the ashes, and they made the rooster on top look more like a phoenix because it's like the Notre Dame Cathedral rose from the ashes. So there's like a lot of talk like that. But again, going back to the symbolism of one is like a church, it's the Catholic Church, the other one, the free market, capitalism, the current world order. And when we think about this, along with the things that have been happening in the United States, we just had the Francis Scott Key Bridge that collapsed. It was hit by a cargo ship, and he's the one that wrote the national anthem. Just a couple years ago, we had the first ever election day, the first ever election day blood moon, which that obviously is not a good sign. The Statue of Liberty shook recently when there was that rare earthquake in northern New Jersey. It shook New York City, and specifically there were reports of the Statue of Liberty shaking, and there's been all sorts of stuff like that going on. So for those that have eyes to see, these are warnings. It's a warning to this current world system that's mostly under the control of the adversary, right? Right now, he's the god of this world in the sense that he has power over those that are wicked. He has his secret combinations that are throughout society, but it's coming to an end. And I feel like these are like foreshadowings of that this old way is coming down, and then it's going to be renovated. We've talked about cathedrals and some interesting things that have been said about cathedrals. And it's my own personal belief that in the millennium, as we have many people convert and join the church, a lot of these churches, cathedrals, so forth, they're probably going to be repurposed and turned into temples or simply, places of worship. So when I first saw this, I was thinking, oh, it's the Denmark Stock Exchange. And I remember watching this Yale University YouTube video. It was like an introductory course on business. And that professor said that the first, the way that he taught it, he said that the first stock exchange was, if at first I wasn't sure if it was Denmark or if it was Holland, but it turns out, according to this article, it was Holland, and not everybody agrees on that. When I say Holland, I mean the Netherlands. The more proper way is the Netherlands, because Holland is like a province of the Netherlands. But it says here there's little consensus among scholars as to when corporate stock was first traded. Some view the key event as the Dutch East India Company's founding in 1602. So when it comes to these, when it comes to these countries, Denmark, the Netherlands, and also not really Sweden, but Sweden, Finland, Norway. I sometimes get them mixed up. But anyway, so it wasn't that, in case you were wondering. Let's go to this article. This is not the one that was in the email. I pulled this up and then remembered that she had a link for an article in the email, but I had already highlighted here. So this is from BBC. Historic Copenhagen Stock Exchange in Denmark goes up in flames. And there's some interesting stuff here. Denmark's historic old stock exchange building in the center of Copenhagen has been engulfed by fire. The 17th century Borsen is one of the city's oldest buildings, and onlookers gasped as its iconic Dragon Spire tumbled into the street below. So we know that one of the symbols for Satan in the scriptures, particularly in the book of Revelation, is the dragon. The dragon represents Satan, right? And his followers. So here you have, and there's a picture of it. So here's these four, dragons. It's almost like, and I'm sure this wasn't intentional by the people that created this, but if Satan had any influence on this, you can see how this could be like a mockery of, for example, the four angels at the four corners of the earth. Here you have Satan with his power and his control over the earth through money and, the systems that he works through. But it's kind of an odd choice, don't you think? I'm sure there's probably more to this story, but it's kind of weird, and they're kind of freaky looking. But yeah, you have these four dragons with their tails that are intertwined and go up the steeple. Here's another view of it. I'll repost these on my X account. But, this was iconic. There's a lot of things going on here, whether it's from the dragons to just being a historic landmark to being a stock exchange and being close to government buildings. Let's continue. Culture Minister Jacob Engel Schmidt said 400 years, which that's an interesting number. That makes me think of the Nephites after Christ came to them. 400 years of Danish cultural heritage had gone up in flames. that might be kind of prophetic, right? You could draw maybe a parallel between, not that like Europe or any one country has been like righteous, but like you have this time when it's kind of like flourishing and then it comes to an end. Members of the public rushed to rescue historic paintings, and it took hours before the fire was under control. The building, dating back to 1625, is a stone's throw away from Denmark's parliament. So that's like, that adds more to its significance. It's not just like some old stock exchange somewhere. You have its significance being historic by itself, but then in addition to that, it's right there next to Parliament. The Folketing, housed in the old royal palace of Christianborg Castle. So money, government, royalty, all this stuff. Danish media said the nearby square was being evacuated and the main entrance to Christianborg was closed because of smoke. The old stock exchange was being renovated. And that's interesting because that's what was going on with Notre Dame when it went up in flames. Was being renovated and had been shrouded in scaffolding and protective plastic covering. Oh my gosh, this just made me think of something. So you have these two structures, Notre Dame, a cathedral, and then this old stock exchange with their symbolism. But then you have the Salt Lake Temple in the Pioneer era temples that have been under renovation, but they've gone through renovation without incident. The renovation in the case of the Salt Lake Temple has run longer than they thought it was going to. Originally, it was supposed to be done by this year, and that would have been incredible. But as of right now, the completion and the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple isn't scheduled, or they're not thinking it's going to happen until 2026. But this is kind of similar to President Nelson, how he keeps going strong, and you have all these other world leaders that are passing away. I have a spreadsheet for that, just to remind you. Let me go to timeline. I think it's under notable. No, it's just under deaths. Where, President Nelson, he's still going, he's still alive, and you have all these other longest reigning, longest serving, oldest living of their kind. Queen Elizabeth II, she passed away the day before he became the oldest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. But you also have China on here, this is the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, longest living leader of the Soviet Union. China as well, Xi Jinping. You have others, the last Greek king, the oldest living pope, the oldest living nun in Catholic Church history. And they died within just a couple weeks of each other. So I've been keeping track of this. This is very similar. The prophet keeps going. The Salt Lake Temple is being renovated without incident, but you have these other, these other renovations that have had these incidents. It currently houses the Danish Chamber of Commerce, which described the scenes on Tuesday morning as a terrible sight. So it's not an active stock exchange. It's being used by the government. Local craftsman Henrik Grage told Danish TV that it was a tragic day. Quote, "This is our Notre Dame." And there's so many people drawing that comparison just because, again, it's so visually similar, these two incidents. Okay. He said, comparing it with the fire that engulfed the roof and spire of the cathedral in the center of Paris almost exactly 5 years ago. The Paris fire broke out under the eaves of Notre Dame on the 15th of April, 2019, when it was also shrouded in scaffolding as part of extensive renovations. Investigators have blamed either a short circuit in the electrics or a worker's cigarette butt that was not properly put out. Oh, and by the way, another thing that I failed to mention with Notre Dame, not only was President Nelson meeting with Pope Francis, but remember, he was there because they were dedicating the Rome-Italy temple, which was a hinge point in the history of the church. And then you have these things, everything that's been going on since that time, the year 2020. You have Notre Dame. You have all these things that we've been tracking on this channel. But that's just like another thing to take note of is that he met with the Pope, dedicated the temple, and then the next month, that's when Notre Dame had its fire, and now it's been renovated. And perhaps ready for the millennium and its future in the millennium. Okay. The cause of the fire in Copenhagen is also for the moment unknown, but emergency services said the scaffolding made their operation more difficult. Officials said the fire was the most intense around the tower. And I'm sure that that's not by accident. If the Lord is intending for this to be a sign for anyone that will recognize it as a sign, then you'd want it to be as dramatic looking as possible, because that's what people react to emotionally. So when you see the most prominent part of a building engulfed in flames, you're going to get a stronger response from people, and hopefully, break the pride cycle, or for those that don't need any breaking, just warning them, giving them a heads up of things to come. Okay, Fire Department Chief Jacob Vedsted Anderson said firefighters faced an almost impossible task accessing the area around the old copper roof. It was not just like how there's not going to be anything that stops the worldwide burning at the time of the Second Coming. It's an impossible task. You can't stop it. It was not until Tuesday afternoon that he said the fire had been brought under control, although much of the building was burned out. Just like how that's going to be the case with the earth. We don't know the percentages of people that are not going to be with us after that event, but it's probably going to be pretty sizable. Who knows? But okay. I'm completely speechless. This is an unparalleled tragedy, one onlooker told Danish media. Well, maybe for maybe for Denmark, but it is paralleled by the Notre Dame Cathedral. Prime Minister Meet, I don't know, Frederickson spoke of terrible images, quote unquote, and of a piece of Danish history going up in flames, just like the world is about to do. When this happens, everything that's happened to this point is just going to be history. It's going to be a completely new world. We're going to look back to the time when Satan had power, and it's going to, at that point, it's going to feel like, almost like it never even happened, and I'm sure that you've experienced this in your life. Like when I went on my mission, it didn't take long before my life before the mission felt like a dream, and that I had always been on my mission. And it was the same thing in the army, and all these major phases of life. Like you look back and it's history at that point. It's going to be surreal. The Dutch Renaissance style building on the city's Stoltholmen, or Palace Island, more royal imagery, was commissioned by Denmark's King Christian IV with the aim of turning Copenhagen into a major trading center. So that's what would make this so historic and such an important place in Denmark. The famous spire featured 4 dragons whose tails were twisted into a spear and 3 crowns, symbolizing close ties with neighbors Norway and Sweden. Here's like a map. So here's the Borsen, and then Danish Parliament right there in the castle. Here's a close-up of one of the dragons. It has really big ears. And a pretty wild neck going on there. So, but this is it right here. This is the whole point. You have all these people, including us, watching this event. And it may not hit some the same way that it does you and me, and that's fine. But for others, it does. And it's a way that the Lord can and does communicate. So I think that's pretty much it. Here's like another video. I'll repost this on X if you follow me there, and of course you'll come across other videos as well. I'm sure there's more, but just another strange happening. Seems like it's related to Notre Dame. Notre Dame seems like it's related to the Salt Lake Temple when it comes to renovations and the spires going, being finished on the same day. Beauty for ashes, just all that stuff together. That's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.